Hi and welcome to 5.4 Quality Assurance. This is the second part of the videos. If you want to have a look at 5.4a, that's with the SL stuff with TQM. This is part of the bigger topic, Operations Management, from 6.11 to 7.31. I've got here for you the pre-reading study notes, and I've condensed it down into sort of the three main areas of TQM, continuous improvement, Kaizen, benchmarking, and ISO. I can't do the math, but they're the five main areas. Have a quick read through this one on here, and I'll give you an idea about where we're getting ourselves into. I'll make a start now, yeah. Alright, we've got to explain the role of Kaizen in quality improvement as one of our key learning outcomes. If you can define Kaizen, give a case reference, and two impacts on how it improves quality, be able to get your 4 marks. That's annoying, isn't it? Next bit for evaluating. So for an 8-mark question, these ones here, it's going to be linked to benchmarking pretty much. So different approaches, benchmarking and potentially ISO tied together. But 2 advantages of benchmarking, 2 disadvantages of benchmarking, and then your recommendation. Finally, your local laws, so your government OH&S and independent testing, and also your ISO standards. And all these things are designed just to make the customer feel more assured that quality is high. It's going to be 100% declarative, and our procedural is 0-note special skills for today, and we're going to have a look at deductive reasoning before we have a look at the exam question. We'll get straight into it. On here, I've got continuous improvement. And different websites and different textbooks will talk about continuous improvements in slightly different ways. The basic idea is that all the 4 functional departments within the business are committed to incremental growth, or growth that's going to be sustained to improving the standards of quality across the whole organization. You could talk about it being as really similar to Kaizen, but there's just a little bit of a difference. This is the overall part that should be doing, continuously improving within the organization. And one way of doing it is to do Kaizen. In the Mando, it's Gaishan. And the big idea is you're doing small incremental things rather than big large ones. So doing like your 1%ers like every week or every month. Maybe over the year you've increased by 52 or 12%. And it's just improving the processes, so your job batch mass and flow. How do I incrementally improve those different stages to make each part result in an overall quality increase? One way of doing it is to do benchmarking. So the Kaizen can sometimes just be internal, whereas the benchmarking would be the external. So you copy someone externally to the business and take all their good ideas that they're doing for best practice and incorporate in that to your continuous improvement plan. Another way of doing it also is to do your ISO standards. So you can copy the best practice in the industry, or you can copy the ISO standards. And these are agreed rules across the globe for different things like supply chain, even the way cement's poured, sizes of screws, those kind of things. If you have a look on Wikipedia, there's a ginormous list of different things. And it's amazing how, as we move things around the world logistics, how we want to have agreed standards to make sure quality stays high. Okay, I've put up together the same one I used before with the total quality control, just to show you what the traditional way of doing it. We're having it all sort of mashed together within the factory and just pumping it out with output and just making sure that output was the big focus. What we're having a look at today is TQM being put in place with continuous improvement. So what we've done is we've split up each of the different areas, so like the 4 functional departments sort of into labour, the raw materials and location. And we've changed our focus from being output to customer focus. So if we can bring Kaizen into these 4 different squares now here, about 1% incremental growths by managers and workers talking together and doing the whole thing, you can get some great quality improvements. I'll talk about it in more detail on the next slide. This is sort of internal stuff, so to do the external, you might do your benchmarking, so you copy someone else's Kaizen approach and you bring it into your own, Apple, Samsung style. Alternatively, you find the ISO standards where they've made their own best practice, and you take that into your system and you say, beforehand we were doing this, now let's use these as our guidelines and quality standards to bring things up. Sometimes Kaizen can just be very internal, and it's like, we've done a good job, but then you go and do the external and you're like, wow, they guys did it better, so we'll benchmark them. And then when you go, hold on, there's actually a standard that covers the whole world that's even better, let's copy those standards. So there are different ways you can bring about continuous improvement and quality within a business. So what's the role of Kaizen? The big idea is that no business operates at 100% efficiency. So Kaizen is talking about that how do we bring up that maybe that missing 10% or that missing 20% of our productive capacity? How do we get it towards like 100% efficiency and everything's working and being used correctly with no waste? If we can do this, we get some good productivity gains. The big challenge is that it's very hard to make it happen quickly. It's meant to be like a 5-year plan, like something you'd incorporate in your mission and vision statement, and you'd break into little parts for your strategic and tactical objectives. One way of doing it is to bring it into your labor. So instead of having your managers sit in the office and the workers do everything, and when there's a problem, managers come and yell at the workers, get your managers and workers to work together. So they might have a look at each of the bits and have meetings on Mondays to talk about quality and why it's important. In different countries, they actually have people line up at the front and they talk about what are the things they're hoping to achieve for the day and talk about quality and why it's important to get that ideology within the workers and the managers. And maybe on the Friday or at the end of each month, you talk about how quality was actually achieved and how we met our 1%. Other way of doing it is to go through the processes. So you might have your job batch, mass and flow, and you might have A, B, C and D as it goes along. The idea is you break down A into like A1, A2 and A3. And then you work out the fine details about A1 and A2 and A3, how they work together. So how can we reduce waste and say movements and the time spent? Do we move the tubs closer? Do we do less turns with the screw? The big part here is that no process is 100% perfect, but if we involve in that continuous improvement, we can bring about better quality outcomes. With this bit here, you're trying to bring about TQM. So doing your quality assurance, following through with your processes, your job batch, mass and flow. The idea is that the small little bits will result in a big overall quality increase. It's like taking out, say, rather than removing all sugar from your diet, which is kind of tough, but if you cut back 20 and 30%, you're amazed what it does to weight loss and everything else. The big idea is less muda, the less waste. Kaizen is a Japanese management system, and it was spearheaded by different companies, but particularly brought to everyone's attention by Toyota. So the muda idea, bringing in less waste, 100% efficiency. So what are the different approaches to TQM? Well, you can do Kaizen. Another way of doing it is also benchmarking. And this is the idea of copying the market leader. So you have a look at their job, so their mass and their flow. So you go into the big factories and you look at the way they've set up the machines, how they operate their operating hours, how the trucks come in, how the trucks leave, those kind of things, and you copy their best practice. You might even reverse engineer. You go and take some of their stuff and you reverse engineer it down and go, oh, that's how they did that. To break down the parts, to see how they simplified and standardized everything. Another way of doing it is to copy a specialized firm. So say with your job and batch, like your jewelers and your hairdressers and your bakers and so forth, what are they doing that gets the customers coming through their door every single day? And you might go through and you might copy their production methods. So they might do things in batches of 5 rather than batches of 3. Those kind of things. How do they bring about quality? Are they better with their customers? It's all meant to be customer focused, but do they have loyalty cards? Do they have certain things that make it better? And you copy those ones and bring it into your system, Kaizen it up and bring in the overall large quality increases. This again goes back to the idea, lots of littles make a big improvement to the whole. Less muda, 100% efficiency. Okay, so what's a sort of a way of doing it? You've given them the Kaizen, and the Kaizen's been the internal parts, and the benchmarking sort of been copying the external. Another way of doing it is these things called ISO standards, and the big idea is assuring quality for the customers, to make sure the customer's happy, because that's the point of TQM. One way of doing it is really common, the ISO 9001, and this brings about a system. So they say if you're trying to make your job batch, mass and flow, and you're thinking, what do I do? The system's already roughly been worked out and saying if you do this, 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 it'll bring up the standards. And if you can do all the things they're asking you to do in the ISO, they allow you to then put the ISO 9001 stamp on your products. And that tells the customer that you're committed to quality standards that are at an international level. You can also do the 10006, which is a guideline for projects. So if you're going to do your job, batch, mass, and flow, if you're going to go do a job thing and make a particularly unique product for a different project and so forth, there are guidelines to make it good for the customers who's about to receive it. There's sort of the international and national stuff. These are the local ones, so your local government laws. So you might be big on your OH&S to make sure pollution is not being done, to make sure the workers are being paid correctly, also make sure you're meeting your contractual and not doing anything criminal within your business. All of these things communicate to the consumer that you want to assure quality if you're meeting the local laws, i.e. you're not breaking the local laws, so you're being a good citizen and a good company. Other part we've got in Australia the CSIRO, and it's basically the government testing area for scientific testing. If you can do external testing to your product, so you do your job, batch, mass, and flow, instead of doing your quality control at the end internally, you take some of those samples and you send them externally out. So the CSIRO have really high standards. If you can meet the CSIRO standards, and you put a meet CSIRO standards stamping on your product, meets local government laws, and it also meets ISO standards, this is a really good way to communicate to your customers and your consumers you're doing a good job and you want quality to be assured in their minds. Okay, I've got a deductive reasoning question for you. I'd like you to have a think about this one here and jot down a few ideas of what you've got and go through, have a look at this here. Is it true, is it false, or is it neither? And give a couple of ideas. Feel free to pause it now and write some notes as you go along. Cool. So organizations should always use Kaizen to improve quality as it has the fastest outcomes. In this case, you could argue it's true. Kaizen internally allows you to have the greatest control. You're not relying on other people to them to copy, and the ISO standards take a long time to implement. You could say because you've got internal control over what's happening, it really would bring about the fastest way to improve quality. It allows you to have direct input over your processes and direct input over your labor. You can argue to say, however, this is maybe false. You might say that Kaizen's good for the short term, but in reality, the fastest in the long term is by benchmarking the people who are the leaders within the industry. Yeah, we do a good job internally, and it may look fast to us, but externally it actually looks quite slow. We just haven't progressed and caught up to the market leader. You might say here this is false as well, particularly if you are the market leader already and you think this isn't going to work. Alternatively, you might be able to argue that it's neither. And one possible answer for neither might be that you simply have to meet international standards. Kaizen internally is great, benchmarking is externally great, and we're really good in America or China or India, but however, we haven't met the international standards. So we've made it really good for our home country, but when we outsource, because we don't have those ISO standards in place, we're actually going quite slow compared to the competitors. And our quality might be 50% where their quality might be 80%. So it looks fast to us, but externally, again, it looks quite slow. There's no right or wrong answers with these things, but it's just a way to get you to think about some of the different possibilities, that there's different alternatives to Kaizen to get quality to come up. Alright, here's an exam style question for you to have a look at. I've got a define one for 4 marks, and I've got a discuss one for 8. So with discuss, you're going to do double data. You're going to have 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages, and a full conclusion to get your full 2 marks at the end. Have a read over the stimulus material here, and if you want to type into Google, into YouTube, the HTC One, you can have a look at some videos to get an idea what the product looks like. Feel free to pause it now, and we'll get into it. Okay, if you were defining Kaizen, Kaizen is about small incremental growths and improvements within the business that result in an overall productivity gain, whereas managers and workers together on their labor and their processes to ensure they meet high quality standards. In the case here, you might be talking about them introducing the Windows Mobile operating system and slowly importing it and bringing out the Service Standard 1 and Service Standard 2 as they update your phone with new system standards. The benchmarking part might be how they've tried to copy the Beats, like Apple had the earbuds, made really cool, everyone loved the earbuds and being seen with them. And HTC One, well, alright, how do we do this? So they did the Beats audio, and you could mention that perception didn't change, but they tried to benchmark and copy other people. One defined, 1 example, 2 marks, another defined, another example, 3 marks on there. So how about do we get this continuous improvement to come together? Well, continuous improvement is the overall organizational goal of improving quality within the 4 functional departments as a business commits to improving quality standards, potentially through Kaizen, benchmarking, or the ISO standards. All of these will result in increasing the market share. And this market share might be done because they lag behind Apple and Samsung. What's some of the advantages of doing this? By doing your Kaizen part, it's bringing together your managers and workers, so you're bringing about your teamwork aspect in Hertzberg, and also Mayo and HL. You can also talk about that it increases the brand overall. By introducing this benchmarking system with the beats part, it didn't result in a brand perception changing, but it did help them better understand what their competitors were doing and how to improve themselves. What's some of the disadvantages? Well, there's going to be the time aspect. To get this going, continuous improvement in Kaizen and benchmarking takes time, and this might make them further lag behind Apple and Samsung because these are the market leaders and they haven't taken enough risks yet if they don't do this. Also, the cost of implementation and the cost of running it. For them to employ a massive system going through all their processes to bring about continuous improvement through Kaizen will take time and, more importantly, cost a lot of money. And this might be just a hassle, but it might be a necessary evil for HTC to get back their market share. Overall, the recommendation for HTC is to adopt continuous improvement if they haven't done so already. Apple and Samsung are market leaders in finding consistent ways to improve their products and update each of their models, such as the 4, the 4S, the 5, and eventually the 5S. And Samsung working their way through, they've progressively listened to their customers, given them what they want, and done those 1% incremental growths to make their supply chain robust and their brand very strong. It's recommended that they do it. Okay, to finish up for today, have a go at the worksheet down below in the description bar to go through some of the details and try the IB questions in your textbook. If you want to read over 5.4 in the notes down the bottom, I've got 2 different versions for you so you can get 2 different points of view. Do you think by the end of today that you can now define Kaizen? You can give an example and talk about 2 quality improvements that it brings about, particularly in the labor area and the process area? Do you reckon you could talk about benchmarking, potentially ISO, about different approaches to quality improvement? So talking about how it improves the brand, it brings about a greater sense of morale and ownership of the work, but it might also again take lots of time and lots of money to bring it in place, but overall it is recommended to make it happen because it is what the industry leaders are doing. And could you explain local and national standards? So could you define ISO standards, provide a case reference, and then talk about 2 ways that it assures the customers of high quality standards through tested procedures and tested ways for labour to make the product that have shown to bring quality improvements. That's it for me today, and I'll see you again in 5.5 location. Bye bye.